Hi, I'm Nina Schur, Hunt Real Estate. I'm here today to talk about a possible problem in selling your home, but maybe not, hopefully not, with John Snyder, the owner of AirWater Environmental. And I've worked with John on many real estate issues, and we're going to talk about how mold impacts the sale of your home. Mold is very common. What is it? How do we identify it? The impact on a sale, and how do we remediate it? And John is a great expert in all of that, and it really has been great pleasure working with him through these past years. So,
thank you, Nina. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
What is mold exactly?
Well, any substance that it's naturally occurring, it's outdoors. In fact, in the summer, the level is very high outside, but it doesn't belong in the indoor environment. So anytime building materials are impacted by water or moisture or high humidity, and there's organic material present, there's a chance of mold growth.
Okay.
And that can destroy building components and deteriorate the building structure over time.
So are there different types, and what do they look like?
There are many different species of mold. That doesn't really become the most important factor in these projects because visually as evident mold or mold that's in the indoor environment can cause a number of problems for the occupants or the building, and the species isn't entirely important. There are some that are considered more toxic than others.
Okay.
And those are sometimes referred to as the toxic black molds, which is really not a scientific term, more of a kind of like a layman's term.
Layman's term.
Yeah.
And how do you test for it? How do you find out if something you're seeing on a wall is actually mold?
Right. In the industry, visual confirmation of mold is the most common, but there are tests. One's called the tape lift test, where they take a little sticky slide and they take an actual physical sample of the mold and is examined under a microscope to identify the species and the level of presence, either light, medium, or heavy, generally. There's also air sampling, which will obtain the mold that's airborne. Right. Again, goes onto a slide, and the microbiologist will identify what is in the air and at what level.
Okay, so if an inspector, you're selling your house and an inspector flags mold, do they say it's possible mold? What's the process from there for taking care of it?
Well, under the new New York State mold law that it was enacted and put into force January 1st, 2016, if we have more than 10 square feet, then a New York State licensed mold assessor needs to come in and do an evaluation and write a protocol for the removal.
And what does that evaluation entail? Like, do they actually send a sample out to be tested, or they just say this is mold? And
sometimes they'll sample it, and for instance, if a seller disputes the fact, a lot of times it's a staining issue, or like in an attic, for
Right.
instance, there could be a black stained roof deck. Some people accept that it's mold based on the visual inspection. Others want more evidence that it's actually mold, so a lot of the assessors will sample it at that point and get confirmation from the laboratory. In my experience, about 98% of the time it actually is mold.
Right.
Sometimes it does come back negative, which is unusual.
Right. So once they do the assessment and then they call you in to remediate it, what is that process like?
Okay, so when we receive the assessment from the assessor, it has a written protocol in there for the steps to follow and then the procedures to be followed and the quantity and what type of containment they are specifying for that. So typical, let's take an attic again as an example. That area would be sealed off in a negative pressure environment, like a tent built at the entry with a air handler and an air scrubber. And then the mold will be treated or cleaned and removed from the surfaces. And then some companies do coatings to prevent future mold, and others just clean it off and they get it cleared that way. There's many approaches, and there's many different products in the industry that most of them are effective, and some have different type of warranties and future prevention.
So, and do you remediate also the source of the mold? Like if there isn't proper ventilation in an attic, would you be the one fixing that, or do they have to have that?
Yeah, the capabilities of mold contractors vary. Some of them have carpentry wings, some others don't. So you may get a combined approach where one company's doing the mold and a carpenter's doing the ventilation or whatever improvement was specified, or some companies do them all. Yeah. There is a trend toward installing ventilation fans in attics. I'm not a big fan of that based on safety issues, because I've read some articles where it can backdraft carbon monoxide into the house. So I try to avoid that.
Yeah.
But, I see it done all the time, and I have not heard of a local issue. I do know I've seen a Colorado family was poisoned by and died from carbon monoxide. It was caused by a fan. But I try to avoid that. It's a liability issue for everyone involved. If you ask the assessor, the contractor, perhaps the realtor, I'm not sure. But passive ventilation intended by the original builder, often blocked by over-insulating by well-intending parties, maybe even the homeowner, is often the issue.
Okay.
So we try to correct that.
And
yes.
sometimes if a new bathroom is installed, I've seen this, and it's not vented through the roof but just into the attic, that would have to be
Yes,
fixed?
very common. The bath vents are exhausting moist shower air into the attics, causing a mold issue. Same thing with the ventilation for a stove, a range hood, and they should be extended to the outside.
Okay, and so what's the average cost? I know that's hard to say because you could have, 20 square feet or,
Right, that brings up, when you said 20 square feet, brings up an interesting issue, because I've seen where people say spot removal is not legal in New York. I think that's an overinterpretation of the mold law. You can do it, but often the conditions that cause that apply to the rest of the area, so I understand that approach, so I don't like to do them either. But some cases there's just a little bit, so we can, take that very affordably, just go take care of that issue. Maybe it's just above the bath vent and really didn't extend to the other areas. Otherwise, we try, if it's a ventilation issue, usually the entire attic or other space has to be treated.
And how much is that
cost?
Going to cost?
It ranges from company to company, but I would say from $2 to $4 a square foot, based on a large project. The smaller it gets, the square foot price breaks down because, it's a lump sum. We're going to be here half a day. It might be $1,000 or whatever.
Right.
But it generally, the pricing is fairly consistent in the industry. So if you've seen attics ranging from $2,000 to $4,000, basements $2,000 to $4,000 as well, depending on the nature of the removal and how much has to be.
Yeah, that's what I've seen for most of the houses that have had mold, and that's a lot of houses, so it's not like it's such a great big deal, right?
It's a very common issue in this area.
Yeah, and it can be, totally remediated to alleviate that, because in New York State, if mold is found on an inspection, the buyer has the right to cancel the contract and just walk away from the sale, or you can negotiate with the homeowner to give a credit for the remediation or have the remediation done. So I've seen people walk away because of that, but really you can so easily remediate it, right?
Yes, it's typically a 1 to 2 day project, and after the project is complete, the issue is resolved, and often there's an actual warranty on future prevention. So walking away from a home that you really want for that reason doesn't make a lot of sense, and I know people get nervous about it, but it can easily be handled correctly. Right,
and I think that's really good for people to know. So, I think this was really helpful to a lot of people out there who are getting ready to sell their homes or who are maybe buying homes, and I really appreciate your talking with me today. How can people get in touch with you?
We're on Facebook at AirWater Environmental, and also at 518-376-7345.
Great. And so I say, don't worry about your mold. Just call John or get it or another certified mold company and have the problem remediated and get that home of your dreams or get your home sold. And thank you for watching today. Nina Schur. You can reach me at 518-368-5578 and see you soon. Thanks.